Hi guys.
Hey.
This is our first MonoGame live broadcast. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Ellis. I work for Xamarin, but I obviously work on MonoGame part-time. And basically, it's a hobby of mine. So with me today is my good colleague, Tom Spilman.
Hello, it's Tom.
So I'm just going to... Tom, do you want to introduce yourself if you can?
Sure, I'm Tom Spilman. I'm from Sick at Games. We've been working on MonoGame for, I don't know, since 2012 or so, something like that. And a few years along with, along with Tom at times and Steve, and it got really loud all of a sudden. Sorry, I'm the GDC people. Loud here.
That's one of the bad things about broadcasting live from GDC, I guess.
Yes, so can't get any live, I guess. Then people later will guess that we didn't plan on, just walk by and join the show.
Yeah. Well, if you see anyone interesting, just grab them. So, has anything interesting happened? Anything interesting happened at GDC this week? Have you got any snippets and stories to tell us?
I'm sure some of the we can save some of the MonoGame news for a little bit later. There's obviously stuff like that to talk about.
Yeah.
But like lots of VR stuff. Lots and lots of VR stuff. VR stuff here is at GDC. If you haven't heard about VR, it's a thing that's very important right now. We'll see how well that goes next year. It'll be a good question. I'm still on the side of next year at GDC there'll be almost no VR stuff, and the bottom would fall out of the industry. But we'll see. A lot of people are putting a lot of big money in this VR, and it's pretty interesting. But let me show you some interesting things. So I'm getting some photos in from people of, like, some of the dumb VR stuff that's on the show floor. I mean, I'm sure these people spend a lot of money and everything, but these are things that are not going to go anywhere. So here's one. Does my phone cooperate? Here's one. This one is a bird thing. I don't know, a flappy bird thing. It's called Birdly. I'm sure everybody's going to put this thing right in their living room.
Seriously?
Yep. I'm going to. Yep. I guess you flap and pretend like you're flying.
Okay.
So I suspect any minute now you'll start. I'm going to pre-order mine, have it in my living room. So I can fly around. So that's one. Let's see, what's another one? Here's this other one.
That was absolutely mad. That was.
Yeah. Well, here's one that's even weirder. And even I don't know how anybody's working with this at the convention floor, because this is like. So here's some sort of controller that you use with your mouth, which is kind of strange. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it looks weird, but it is something you use with your mouth. I don't understand how that's hygienic. But yeah, my pre-order's in for that too, I guess.
I'm sure there's some industries that would be useful in. But
I guess, yeah, there might be a couple that we won't mention, but yeah. I mean, I don't know. Some of those things actually aren't new. They're things that have been around in the past. Like, I mean, this is my 13th GDC, I think, something like that, 13th. So, like, years and years ago, you'd come to GDC and there'd be people with smell-o-vision, where they, you'd plug in this peripheral to your PC and, you'd be walking through a swamp and it would smell, like a rotten swamp area, and you'd be walking through some flowers and it would smell like roses and that kind of stuff. There's always been those kinds of gadgety devices for trying to enhance games, but they in general, they're not popular. They don't pick up because nobody cares about that kind of stuff. VR has a chance, but I'm not convinced of it yet. But even though I'm not convinced, we have I got invited to go check out the Valve Vive VR goggles. It's Valve's goggles. It's supposed to be like the super duper best ones. Overall, I think the experience is awesome, and I'm sure they're fantastic. But I still don't think people are going to buy them in droves and put them in their living rooms. So it's gonna be like it's gonna be interesting, it's gonna be fun, and then it's gonna end up like where, you know, a year later it's just gonna be sitting collecting dust under your TV in the living room. So we'll see. But yeah, that's mostly GDC. Seems like it's mostly VR this year. Lots of VR sessions, lots of VR vendors.
Yeah, I did see an announcement today from Sony, I think it was. They come up with a pair of headphones that will fix the in-ear ear problem, apparently. It sends signals.
I hadn't heard that one. I know they.
Yeah.
Right.
So so you wear the headphones with you wear the headphones with their goggles, which has had their phone on it, and the headphones actually interact with the way you sense your direction and stuff by using some kind of electrical pulses, and you don't get sick apparently, and you can feel like you're flying. So
right. Well, I mean that's a lot. I mean that solves a big problem. I mean, for sure there are people that be nauseous in hand time. And I mean, the guidance generally for most of the VR things is like not long periods of time. Like they should be 10 to 20-minute experiences. You know, you shouldn't have those things on for 2 or 3 hours. That might seriously damage you in some way. Some people could probably do it, but I'm sure a lot of people can spend this in there, especially if they were having, you know, motion sickness problems. But with something like that, I can see how that would improve things.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Right, just a little shout out to the people who are actually watching. If you have any questions for us, we're going to do a little Q&A session a little bit later on, probably in about 15 minutes or so. So if you do have questions, there should be a little box on the right-hand side of your screen where you're watching. Feel free to answer. Feel free to ask if there's anything, you know, that you want to know about, and Tom and I will endeavour to answer your questions, preferably MonoGame related, if that's okay. Okay, so basically, it's been a bit of a busy week for MonoGame this week, hasn't it? I think we had some quite exciting stuff. First and foremost was that MonoGame 3.5 went out of the door.
Yeah. Yes, finally. I mean, it was a little less than a year, but it was almost a year. I mean, it wasn't that we couldn't get it shipped sooner. It was just, I mean, it's the typical open source problem where it's like, you know, you're always trying to make it a little bit better. And it's like, well, let's commit this couple more fixes and then we can do it. And it's like, well, you know what, this real critical thing came up. Let's go ahead and fix that. And then that, you know, rolls on for months. And the next thing you know, or like one weekend we're busy and we don't have time, you know, and that just rolls on until the point it's like, oh, it's been a year. So yeah, it's been a year. There's been a lot of improvements, which is great. The plan moving forward though is quarterly releases. So at this point, the plan we set forth is every quarter we're going to have a release. So the next one's going to be June 12th or 13th or something. I just picked that date arbitrarily, but to be June, you know, then the next one's like September, the last one's like December. So it'll be something like that moving forward. So every 3 months, there will be a release. Hopefully that's not too busy, like it doesn't become too distracting. If it does, I think instead of trying to like slow them down, instead we should try to make the process of updating easier. You know, I know that came up a couple times. Some questions came up like, how do you update from 3.4 to 3.5? The complexity's there. It depends on how you used it and things like that. So I think there's a post on the community site now on how to do that upgrade.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, somebody posted on the community site.
I posted that today. There's a couple of little changes. Yeah, it was mostly to do with the way we're finding the assemblies now. Before it was a bit of a mismatch of problems. We couldn't, on Windows we were using locally installed assemblies, on Mac and Linux we were using NuGet packages, and you ended up in a situation where you had a project in Visual Studio and you couldn't really build it on Mac. So that was a problem. So, and fortunately with 3.5 we fixed that. But if you have a new template now, if you do file new project, that will all work. That project will work on Windows and Mac and Linux exactly the same.
Right.
Going there, like I said, the post is up there now, so people can upgrade themselves. The interesting thing is we also went for .NET 4.5, didn't we? We upgraded to .NET 4.5. Yes.
I believe that, I don't remember the exact reason that was kicked off. There was something between the use of proto-build. Proto-build, I think, was moving to 4.5. And just the fact all the platforms that we support now all run 4.5. So it was kind of like, well, why are we running an older version? You know, so all that causes, I believe those go all at the same time. There's some language features line, so it's like, yeah, it made sense to move forward. It's the thing that is a little bit annoying is that if you're not, if you don't realize that, and you go to build, you'll get a build error that doesn't say like, "Hey, you're on the wrong .NET version. Fix it, dummy." It's more like a weird error that makes no sense at all, and you're like, "What the heck is this?" So unfortunately, you know how that's been set up by Microsoft and the other vendors is it just doesn't message very well whenever you have to deal with that.
Yeah.
But if you go to build and it fails to build for some weird error and you're not sure, go check your .NET version on your game project. It's most likely that.
Okay, well, that's pretty cool. So, I mean, one of the things I was really excited about this release was the new integration on the Mac and Linux side with the content pipeline stuff. I mean, that was, I think that was worth waiting for this release, to be honest.
Right.
The Mac users now can basically work the same way that Visual Studio guys do.
Right.
I'll just for the people who don't use Mac, I'm just going to do a quick little demo. Let's see if I can find it here.
All right, so going to a screen demo. I see a black screen now.
Hopefully that'll come through.
There it is.
There we go. Yeah. Okay. So this is basically a file new project. So I'm just going to do another one, and we're on a Mac. So file new project. I'm just going to pick this MonoGame cross-platform desktop project. That's our new kind of Mac, Linux, and Windows project. Effectively, the binaries that we produce from this can run on all of those platforms. So if you want to target, say, Steam, that's probably a good choice. So MonoGame. Let's just go with whatever I do. So this is out of the box. It's just gonna build. There's no NuGet packages. Everything's sorted. So the interesting thing now is this is the experience that a Visual Studio person has had for a while now. They can do double click on the content project. We can just go in. We can just add a font. I'm going to call this font. We can just save that, and now we can actually start using that, which is great. So if we do the whole thing, you know, it's create a sprite font. I'm going to go and load the content.
You know, I think when you don't open up the content project, it's opened up on a second mod. We didn't see it in the main view here.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It did open. The
you might want to show that again.
Yeah. Well, I can only share one screen at a time, which is really kind of weird on this hangout thing. I'll fix that for later.
Okay.
So,
must be a Mac thing.
Yeah, I'll just copy and paste the code earlier. So all I did was added a sprite font. So if we just open that with the source editor, you can see I just added the sprite font. I did it all on the Mac. I'm not going to link any files here now. This is just going to be me. I'm just going to build it and run it. And it's just going to work. So let me just share that.
That's also on the other side.
Yeah, they won't be able to see that. So let's.
Can you not drag and drop that over to that window to the other screen, or is that a Mac thing that doesn't work?
Oh, it's a Mac.
That one.
Well, it's the Google Hangout thing. So there we go. I mean, that's running.
Yay!
MonoGame rocks in there, and that was it. That's all it did.
You misspelled MonoGame, but that's okay.
Yeah, I know. I was typing it. So it's live. You get these things.
Yeah, why not?
So it's the same experience. I didn't have to link any XMP files, nothing like that. So that's personally, I think the 3.5 was worth the wait for that alone.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, basically, it's mirroring the functionality that we've had in the Visual Studio template for a little while before we even had it in the Visual Studio template. I mean, it wasn't only maybe a year plus ago that we were still then copy it over and set them as copy new copy set it as content items and tell it to copy the output folder. That's basically what we were doing originally until we finally got good integration into Visual Studio. So this kind of makes this thing up to par with that.
Yeah, I mean, at least it's a nice similar experience to everybody. It also means the projects can be used across all the platforms. So I think that's just great.
Right.
So, any other top things from the release? What was your favorite bit about some of the stuff that we did?
The more tests we get in there, the more reliable the build can be. That's something that we're kind of stating that the next release, my goal is, like, we added something like 150 new unit tests since last year, which is good, but I mean not great. So I'm hoping we can add another, the next release. There's a lot of things that we can still be testing that we're not, and it's the more that we can add in there, the better the quality we're going to have out of the release, including testing some things that are kind of hard, like the pipeline tool itself and some of the audio stuff and the input, which is an also hard area to test. But I think we're going to try to do it, because if we can do that effectively, then we're going to be able to, shake out more bugs out of the runtime. At the same time, another thing that we're looking for the next release is to get and Linux builds running through the unit test system, right? Windows desktop code, which, again, most of the code is in MonoGame is shared, so mostly it does cover a large bit of bugs, but there's still platform-specific bugs that don't get tested. So we're going to make an extra effort to make sure that we run unit tests at least on the Mac, so that at least on that side we know that the platform-level code is working properly, and then at the same time try to get something set up to do Linux as well, which that involves, that's more complex. We have to figure out, like, okay, well, what flavors of Linux do we run it on, and things like that. It's a little bit more complex. Then eventually, if we can get those two for the next release, then maybe we can push on and look at getting testing on mobile, and then eventually testing on consoles as well, for different console releases. So lots of stuff to do there. It doesn't add any new features, but it's a quality thing that other engines can throw a dozen engineers at the problem. We kind of have just ourselves and some volunteer time. So but it's a major win for us as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. There might be people watching who don't know how MonoGame is funded or how we work. We're effectively a team of volunteers. The core team are just volunteers. So we don't
Okay.
Oh, who we got there?
Oh, it was Jaime from Microsoft who's coming by saying congratulations for I guess the thing we haven't talked about yet, the fact on Monday Microsoft announced that MonoGame is coming to Xbox One, which was something that we've been working with Microsoft on for a while. I mean, we've been talking to them for like 2 years, before the Xbox One shipped. And it's unfortunately at the time it was not high priority because they had a big console to ship and lots of AAA games to support, and it was just they had an indie solution that was working on 360, and they were kind of like, okay, well we're going to focus on AAA for right now, so it wasn't a high priority. In the meantime, we were able to get MonoGame running on PS4 and and last year on Vita. With I guess Monday was also announced that the Axiom Verge for Vita was insert, so so that's good. So now with the announcement Monday, MonoGame is coming to Xbox One. Not only is it coming to Xbox One, there's two paths on Xbox One, and you've probably heard some of the news this week. One path is through the native development. It's the Xbox Developers Kit. That's when you're running on the exclusive partition. It's basically how almost all the AAA games are made. It's to the metal, you use the full power of the device, and has full access to everything. It's basically how your Call of, your Crisis and those kinds of games are being written. So that's what was announced Monday, was that. But last year at GDC, it was shown, MonoGame running on Xbox One was shown last year, but what it was shown last year was MonoGame platform. What runs on Windows.
Yeah, that was quite an impressive demo. I was watching that live.
Yeah, and that was great. I mean, it's basically that's what Microsoft announced also this week, was that they're bringing Windows Universal apps to Xbox One, with the idea being that you can build a universal app that runs on Windows 10, on tablets, on the phones, and Xbox One. You don't have to build like one executable that runs in all places. It's not like that, but it's one set of APIs that that can target all these platforms. So the benefit that you have there, they're going to be here to access for people that don't have dev kits. You know, that's something that's coming. I mean, they haven't announced exactly when, but you know, we should keep our ears out at build announcements then. And you know, it's just another path. I think for most indies, the UWP path is probably going to be fine. You know, it really depends on your game, what your needs are available to as well. So we'll support both paths. You know, here soon. I don't know exactly when they're going to start making the XDK path available to people. I know that I'm working on it, so I'm still working on it, but I don't know what the plan is to when they're going to start letting studios in. But if you're interested in using MonoGame with Xbox One, contact ID at Xbox and tell them that you're interested. They'll get you talking to the right people and get you set up.
Yeah, I was going to say that even targeting going down the UWP route, just using a standard Windows 10 Universal app, I still think you need to contact ID at Xbox to get it published on the Xbox. You can still publish on the store.
Well, actually, that's not true.
Is it not true?
I saw a talk yesterday with Chris Charla. He's the lead at ID at Xbox, who's the one that helped us get on the platform. He was the one that really spearheaded it internally. But what the idea is that there's going to be two paths. There's going to be two kind of tiers you can kind of hit. There's going to be one tier where you can be as a completely 100% independent developer, build a game using UWP and publish to Xbox One without asking permission or anything else. You just have to do, it's going to be like your normal kind of mobile thing. You know, you build a game, submit it to their certification, it passes, it's in the store, done. So that's one path. But if you want to take advantage of Xbox Live and certain features that are not available to the general public, then you have to go through ID at Xbox. And that's if you want to use Xbox, there's a Xbox Live on UWP, which works with both Windows 10 desktops and mobile devices and Xbox One. If you want to do that, you have to contact ID at Xbox. If you just want to ship a game on the platform, you can do it independently, 100% yourself.
Yes. So effectively, if someone has a UWP app today, that would probably work on the Xbox One as is, without any changes, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, if you're aiming to ship on Xbox One and you want to get it ahead, if you make it work under UWP and your game fits it, you know, if it performs fine there and it works well, then for sure you'll be in a position where you could contact ID and Xbox and say, hey, I want to publish this, you know, and get on the early access to get access to the Xbox Live bits, and you could have an Xbox game. So it's just up to you, and it should be that easy. I mean, even Sony's had it as well, and that, you know, they've had self-publishing now for like a year or two now, but it's a little bit more involved in that you actually have to get dev kits and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's changing on the Microsoft side now at this point. You know, now that, you know, it's been a couple of years since the console came out, they're now at a point where they have time to focus on the indies and solving those problems. But, you know, they're playing a little catch up, but I mean, it's going to be pretty good. I think everybody will be really happy.
Excellent. Okay. Well, this is going to lead us straight into the questions now, because one of the questions we've got is, on the Xbox One, who is providing the C#/.NET runtime?
I am. I'm providing it.
Okay.
Here was the deal. There was always a problem with using. Our first option, obviously, was to use Microsoft C# on Xbox One. But at the time, you know, and even now, that doesn't run there. Like, it's funny, a lot of these things have been decided and worked out. That was like a year ago when C# is still not even open source. You know, C#'s been open source for a little more than a year at this point. It hasn't been that long. So at the time, we didn't have much of a choice. It's like, well, we need to use Mono. The problem with using Mono was that the licensing was always difficult. Since Mono is GPL, that means in order to use GPL on a closed platform, you have to license it, and the licensing was always the pricing was always out of reach for most developers. I mean, if you try to license it as an independent, you might be able to get an okay agreement. But if you wanted to license it as a console manufacturer like Sony or something else, the pricing became so high that it didn't make it cost effective. I mean, you're not shipping Call of Duty on this thing. You're shipping, a couple dozen indie games where, maybe half of them, are pretty good hits, but the rest of them are not. It's not cost effective to have a ridiculous license for it. So there was always a licensing problem there that caused trouble. So I guess it was 2014. Yeah, late 2014. I kind of got fed up with that treadmill, because it isn't the first time. I mean, there's been problems with this in the past with other projects and things like that. I got sick with that treadmill. I said, well, I'm going to solve the problem. At the time, the cross compiler concept was a pretty hot idea. People were cross compiling C++ code into JavaScript, in order to run stuff in the browser. I think it was that year, maybe it was a year before, Epic showed Unreal Engine running in the browser using JavaScript. And just late in 2014, it just hit me. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to run a cross compiler and convert C# code into C++, so I can run it on whatever platform I want to. So that was the goal. So it started like that, and over the last, year and a half at this point, I guess, I spent time basically making that cross compiler work. So what it is, and it's currently being used it's currently shipped in Towerfall Vita, uses it. Towerfall Axiom Verge on Vita uses it, and Axiom Verge on Xbox One uses it.
That's pretty cool. So effectively,
still early days.
Yeah,
it's working on 2 different platforms, and it's allows you to bring your C# game to any of these platforms, as long as there's a C or C++ you need. It's kind of designed. There's some other projects out there for doing the same thing. They've taken different approaches. Our approach was kind of like, we want to go from intermediate language to C++ code, C and C++ code, directly. We didn't want to go through ILVM.
LLVM, isn't it? Is it LLVM?
Yeah, LLVM. That's correct.
Yeah,
I got stuck there for a second. LLVM, we didn't want to do that because the problem with that is that LLVM is great, except it's really optimal for like open platforms. When you get to platforms that are closed, like consoles have very particular hardware, sometimes very particularly tuned for things that games do, and LLVM just is not optimized for those platforms. So you get code that works okay on those platforms, but it's not perfectly optimal for those platforms. By cross-compiling to C++, you then can use the C++ compiler for that platform, which has those optimizations that the engineers at those console manufacturers spent time on, and you get those optimizations. So yeah, it's not as direct of a jump, and you have to deal with this extra C++ step, but it gives you a more optimal result in the end. But on top of that, it's more flexible. Like if tomorrow a console manufacturer comes in and says, hey, we have this new secret console, here's the C++ compiler, go, it's going to be like, well, if we're using LLVM, we'd have to figure out, like, does it support it? What's the instruction set? Does it work at all? With this, it's like, doesn't matter. Compile C++ code, let's compile it, go. So it's a lot simpler kind of approach. And it's the same approach, like when I started this, a couple months later, Unity announced theirs, which Unity's using your IL CPP stuff, which is essentially the same thing. They're taking IL code and going CPP code, which is the same thing I'm doing. The only difference is they have a couple of engineers on it. I am working on it almost by myself. So an offset of power there. Essentially, but essentially the same thing. I was gonna say, so what it ends up doing is we still have the garbage using the Boehm garbage collector on it, which works okay. It's the same one that basically Unity's using, but Microsoft just a couple months back open sourced their garbage collector, so it's open source, not open source MIT garbage. So it's so that's going to give us the ability to switch over to their garbage collector, which should improve things as well. Plus, I want to do an experiment using a reference counted garbage collector, which in theory I could potentially do. The generator just has to change a little bit to support it, but in theory it could be done, just to see as an experiment of whether a reference counted garbage collector can improve performance, or is it better for a game than anything else? And this whole thing is built around, I'm not building a cross-compiler to cross-compile like native apps, desktop apps or anything like that. The whole goal of it was to cross-compile games, and that's it. That's the only goal of it. And it's strictly a AOT process, and that the idea is not that you convert from C# code to C++ and then you start working C++ all day. The idea is that it's a post process. You compile your C# code, it under the hood generates C++ code, compiles it, and that's the executable you run. So it's just like an AOT, except it uses C++ as its intermediate language in a way. So you can think of it like that.
I guess eventually, hopefully, it will get to a point where you have a MonoGame Xbox One project in Visual Studio, and you'll just be able to build it, and it will just do everything under the hood, and possibly even deploy it, and then maybe even debug it. I don't know. I mean, it's probably a long way off by the sounds of it, but I'm guessing that's the end goal, maybe.
Some tighter integrations with Visual Studio and the workflow is the next thing that I'm going to be working on, because it's currently not tightly integrated like that. It's kind of like a couple batch files. And it's like, okay, compile the C# code, then run this batch file, then compile this other solution, and then it'll run. To try to integrate it in a smoother way. Luckily, I've done that a couple times, so I have some ideas of how to do it. But there's still some tricky things. And luckily, some of the guys at Microsoft are helping out and giving me some ideas on how to deal with some of those things, at least for their tool set. Which surprisingly, like every console that, surprisingly, Vita, PS4, and Xbox One all use Visual Studio 2012. So it's nice. It's going to be in one place, and I can support all the platforms I need.
Yeah, I had that problem when I was on the ID program, because I've got my dev kit, and one of the things I had to do was like, I have to go back to VS 2012, really?
Yeah. Well, now that
hopefully they'll fix that at build.
Well, everybody's going to be moving to 15 next, so
yeah,
it'll be there. So it's working okay. There's still a lot of work to do on it, but the plan is that after I get I want to get another game shipped out of it, like the Axiom Verge 1 on Xbox One, and then at that point I should be in a position where I can open source it. The plan is to open source the whole thing. It'll just be on GitHub, and anybody that wants to use it or contribute to it can do that. At that point, we're hoping that just completely unlocks the, any platform. So at that point, if you're writing a game, if you want to write a game in C#, you don't have to worry like, oh no, am I going to be able to get to platform A, B, or C? It's like you'll be able to get to those platforms no matter what. Or at least the cross compiler will be there, and you will be able to get, a C# runtime that works on those platforms, which has always been our bottleneck or our limiting factor at times.
Yeah, you just answered the question I was about to ask. Are you going to open source it, and when can people get their grubby hands on it, really?
Yeah, soon. I mean, some people are going to get their grubby hands on it earlier, because we're going to roll it out to a couple of developers that are porting games in order to let them kind of get a first shot at it and give us some feedback. Sure. A first shot at it and get some feedback on it, but then eventually I want to open source it. I just don't want to open source it all of a sudden just because, I'm busy enough not to have to support like a million people at the same time. So I want to try to make it a little bit more user-friendly before it just gets out there to everybody. But as soon as I can get it out there to everybody, the better. So it'll happen soon.
Excellent. So watch this space effectively to the people listening.
Yeah.
We will tweet and publish stuff as we do. So let's move on to. We've got a couple of questions left. We've got one. Do we have plans for DirectX 12 backend support and some deep changes for it? So effectively, I think, are we planning DX12, and are we planning any large changes to the API to actually support some of the functionality?
Yeah, I mean, my current thinking, and this is still like in discussion phase, because we kind of have to discuss it on MonoGame and kind of figure out how we want to do it. My current thinking is we kind of want to take a two-pronged approach to this. The first thing is, and the thing that we could probably do quicker, but we might have to wait on, is I think we want to still provide the existing XNA API for a while. That's works the way it does today. No changes, just works the way it does today. But under the hood, start using Vulkan, DX12, Metal under the hood of that regular API. There are potentially, and I've talked to some people that I know in Microsoft that are experimenting with this right now. There's potentially some performance benefits to using these new APIs under the old DX9 style APIs. So we're hoping that, you know, I'm waiting to see what those guys tell me to say, like, yeah, we're seeing some benefits. They're going to share some code with us, and see if, like, hey, is this going to help us or not, or is it just a waste of time? We should just not worry about it. If there's some benefits there, we might integrate it under there just to get those benefits. Secondarily, we need to write a whole new API, because I mean, DX12, Metal, and Vulkan are completely radically different APIs. They separate your memory allocations from your resource, you know, creation. You know, it's just a completely different thing to what you've seen in the past. So the problem's going to be there's twofold. Like, one, we want to provide an API that, you know, that exposes that stuff in an appropriate way that is, you know, doesn't limit the power that you can use it. We don't want to make it where you have to write crippled DX12 programs because we don't provide enough API.
Yeah.
But at the same time, not make it as difficult to use. If you've seen any samples for DX12, you'll see that you have to write like literally 10 or 20 times the amount of code that you would to write something in DX11. You know, same thing with Vulkan. It's very verbose. There's a lot of things to set up and do. So we want to try to find an API that lets you do all the stuff, but at the same time, you know, makes it easy to kind of jump in there. So it's going to be difficult. We're going to have to figure that out. So there's that. Then on top of that, we have to make sure that whatever API we come up with covers all three APIs well. Like, it looks like we're stuck with three APIs. I don't think that, it seems like the consensus is Apple's never going to implement Vulkan, but we'll see. But it seems we need all three APIs, and we need to make sure that whatever API that we introduce can wrap those other APIs effectively, and we don't introduce any problems like we've had with OpenGL, where OpenGL doesn't really fit the DX API very well, and we have to kind of jump through all these hoops under the hood to make it work.
Yeah.
I would like that, and the only way to do that is to basically look at all three APIs, come up with a common design, and really come up with a good common design. I mean, this is the kind of thing that internally, I'm sure Microsoft took a couple of engineers that really know their stuff, sat down and came up with an API design and came up with x84. We have to kind of do that as open source and kind of come up with this design as a group, and you know, move forward with it. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult because of that, but we'll see. It's going to be interesting. But yeah, the plan is, I mean, it's just a matter of timing. You know, right now I think we have enough other bigger fish to fry. Like yeah, DX12 would be great, but I don't think that there's any games using MonoGame that are crippled because DX12 isn't supported. So I think we're okay. Like, in fact, even on Xbox One, we're currently using DX11. We're not using DX12. So we can stick with DX11 and OpenGL that we have right now and move forward with that as we are. But eventually, we're going to have to solve that problem. So it's on our roadmap to support it, but I can't say exactly when we're going to start supporting it. It just depends, you know. Right now, our focus is on all things.
Stability and stuff like that. I mean, obviously, the XNA4 API is an awesome API, so there's quite a bit of pressure to get any new API that we do right. So it will last as long as, you know, the XNA4 API has. I mean, it's still relevant today, so that's obviously a very big job. So watch this space. People should get involved, shouldn't they?
Yeah, if you have some ideas, you know, post it. You know, I can't guarantee we're gonna take. You know, we're gonna do exactly what we listen, and at least, you know, if there's some good ideas, we'd love to hear. You know.
We'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah.
Okay, we got one more question. And I think that's this one's from Dominic, actually. He's kind of curious that you've been, obviously, Sickhead Games have been working on the PS Vita and the Xbox One Sport. He's curious if you've got any games in the pipeline that you're going to release.
We have a couple of prototypes that we've worked on. Nothing that we're happy with. You know, the truth is, we've been stuck in this kind of rut of contract work now for a couple of years. You know, we got out of it for a little while. We did some mobile stuff. It didn't go as well as we'd like. Then we jumped back into some contract stuff. And we're kind of back in that that cycle, and it's kind of a hard cycle to get out of. Having having some milestones due, getting them done, getting paid is great. Starting for a year and a half to make your great game, shipping it, and hoping that the world doesn't break your heart and never buy the game. That's a whole that's a whole other
Been there,
thing.
done that.
It's a big jump. So we're working on some things, and we have some opportunities. We're just kind of just looking for the right point, and it could, you might hear something soon. You never know.
Excellent. Okay. Right. Well, we're at the 40-minute mark, which is quite cool. So
we made it.
Probably, yeah, we made it 40 minutes, and I thought we would have trouble filling 30 minutes, but there we go. Just for the audience, I'd just like to say this is something it's an experiment. We're going to try and do this at the moment once a month. So the next one is going to be scheduled kind of mid-late April, which is after build, I think.
Mm-hmm.
When's build?
I thought it was early April, but I don't know. I don't know for sure.
Yes, it is. No, actually, it's the last week in March, so it's in about 2 weeks. Actually, it's next week. Is it next week? No, the week after. Yeah, it's 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So, yeah, effectively, so there can be some stuff. Hopefully, there'll be some nice stuff at build. We're going to see if we can get someone, one of our friends from Microsoft, to join us as a guest that time, so we can ask them lots of questions. So that's going to be our next one. So that'll be in April. Depending on how this all goes, we'll keep doing them once a month, and if there's demand for it, maybe a bit more often, I think.
Sure.
So, which is quite cool. So, Dom's answered late March, which is cool. So, excellent. So, I'm going to let you. Thank you for attending, Tom. I know you're busy.
Oh, no problem. No problem. I'm going to go check out this Valve Vibe device, and then we have the MonoGame meetup for people here at GDC here at 5 o'clock at the Microsoft lobby bar.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's anyone watching this at GDC and you're not planning on going to this meetup, you really need to go to. So
if you're at GDC and you're watching this, you're crazy. Go do something else. You don't need to be watching this. This will be recorded. You can see it later.
Excellent. All right then, Tom. Well, thanks for joining us. Thank you everyone for viewing and watching. And we're going to sign off now, and we'll see you in a month. Get involved, as they say. Catch you later.
Bye.